Happy Friday, Community Church and friends. Thanks for joining me today. I have one big announcement. Don't forget that tomorrow, Saturday, is our big VBS celebration, right? Our back to school kickoff. All of our kids that were in VBS are invited to come, and we're going to have a big party. I believe there's going to be a water slide and games and snacks and lots of great things. So anyone who came to VBS is welcome. It includes parents and volunteers, but also if you would like to help out with this event, I'm sure that Mark would love your help. So the event is tomorrow from 11 to 1. Setup is at 10, and of course there's always cleanup afterwards. So if you are interested or able to go, you can always email Mark at castleberrychurch.org. And so that's our big activity for tomorrow. We just want to continue to love on our VBS kids and families and continue to bless them throughout this upcoming school year. There are lots of other activities coming up with and opportunities with our other Castleberry churches. So stay tuned to Pastor Ted's emails and the bulletin announcements, and make sure that you are up to date on all of those events that are coming up. There are a couple different ones, so stay tuned. And this week I was reading through the Gospel of Luke, and I came to the story of Jesus healing the 10 lepers, and only one of them came back to say thank you. And I've heard this story 1,000 times. I'm sure you have too. And I always thought it was just about thankfulness, right? To say thank you for things that God has done in your life. And while it is important to say thank you, and the story is a little bit about thankfulness, something different stood out to me this time that I read it. And so I wanted us to take a look at this story, and I'll kind of point out some of the things that stood out to me, and I'd love to share that with you today. So if you have your Bibles or some kind of electronic device, however you want to, I'm going to go ahead and read the story to you. It is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17. This is verses 11 through 19. And it says, "Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, 'Jesus, Master, have pity on us.' When he saw them, he said, 'Go show yourselves to the priests.' And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, 'Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?' Then he said to him, 'Rise and go. Your faith has made you well.'" Now, like I said, I'm sure some of you have heard this story over and over again. I'm just going to go through a couple of things, some backstory to this. At this point in the Gospel of Luke, it says that Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, meaning he's on his way to the crucifixion. Jesus knows that this is going to be, that this is happening. And so specifically the Gospel of Luke, the others do it too, but Luke spends a lot of time recording Jesus's healing and miracles and his parables on his way to Jerusalem. And so it says he traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. Now, this is interesting because we should all know by now that Jews and Samaritans do not like each other. They don't get along very well. And so it's very interesting in Luke chapter 9, which seems like several chapters ahead of 17, but in the timeline, it's not very far in advance. In Luke chapter 9, verses 51 to 53, it says, "As the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem, and he sent messengers on ahead who went into a Samaritan village to get things ready for him. But the people there did not welcome him." So in this instance, Jesus is kind of avoiding Samaria because the people there didn't like him and they weren't welcoming to him. It's interesting because that little tidbit in chapter 9 comes right before the story of the Good Samaritan in chapter 10. In case you didn't know, we're going to talk a little bit about Samaritans today. And specifically in the Gospel of Luke, he points out the difference between Jews and Samaritans. If you're not sure of that, Samaritans are like, they were Jews that intermarried. And so the pure Jews who lived in Jerusalem and Judea were not happy with the Samaritans. There was a lot of tension there because you weren't real Jews. Don't let anybody tell you that racism is a new thing. Just saying. Anyway, so as they go to this village, right, they're kind of on the outskirts. They're trying to keep a low profile. Jesus knows he's going to Jerusalem. He knows the Pharisees are looking out to get him or to put him in prison or obviously eventually to kill him. But he's going into this village, and there are 10 lepers who are outside the village. Now, leprosy then was not curable disease. If you got it, there was no hope for you, and you were not allowed to be around anybody. You weren't allowed to be in the city. You weren't allowed to really do much of anything except stay away and stay on the outskirts. And if miraculously you were healed, you had to go present yourself to the priest and be claimed that you were clean or healed before you could re-enter society. This doesn't sound like anything that, is familiar to us right now, right? There's no disease right now that's out there that has no cure, that, you have to distance yourself. It doesn't sound like anything that we're familiar with, right? I'm just being a little silly there. Obviously, COVID and leprosy are very different things, but if you want to try to have something to relate to, it's a little bit similar to that, So these lepers are just shunned and not treated very well. They're not allowed to see their friends or their family. And yet when Jesus walks by, they must have known who he was. He had a reputation. They call out to him. Now they kept their distance, which was nice, but they called out to him, Jesus, Master, have pity or have mercy on us. It's interesting because recorded in scripture, the only people who ever called Jesus Master are his disciples. Yet these 10 lepers call him Master. Very interesting. And so Jesus heals in a lot of different ways, right? Sometimes he speaks. Sometimes he reaches out and touches them. Sometimes he does it from far away. The one time, it still baffles me, he spits in the dirt and makes mud and rubs it on the blind man's eyes. I still don't get that one. We'll talk about that another day. But Jesus heals in lots of different ways, right? But in this case, he didn't touch them. He didn't even heal them immediately. Pay attention to this part. He says, go ahead and go and show yourselves to the priest. So it took a little bit of faith on their part that they trusted him, and as they went to the priests, then they were healed. It wasn't an instant thing. So that's really interesting. And obviously they were healed. They go to the priest. He says, yes, you're clean. That's the subtext there. But there's just one who goes back to Jesus and says, thank you. And he happens to be a Samaritan. Now, we have no idea how many of them were Samaritans. There might have been half Jews, half Samaritans, a mix of other. We have no idea of knowing. But we know that this one that came back was a Samaritan. And so something that stood out to me in this is that even though Jews and Samaritans didn't like each other, Jesus healed this man anyway. And when the man came back to Jesus, it says he fell at his feet and thanked him. And Jesus says, we're not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? But then at the end, he says this, rise and go, your faith has made you well. Well, this man had already had faith, right? When they asked Jesus to have mercy on them, and they turned on their way to go to the priest, that took some faith. They already had faith. They already called Jesus master. They already believed that he would heal them, and Jesus did heal them. So all of them, all 10, had faith. It wasn't just this one man who came back and had faith. But it says, your faith has made you well. Well, he was already healed, right? So when he came back, he had already had faith and he had already been healed. So what is Jesus saying when he says, your faith has made you well? The difference between the 9 and the 1, obviously the 1 came back and said, thank you. But when Jesus says, your faith has made you well, another translation is whole. Your faith has made you whole. That because this man had faith and because he came back and fell at Jesus' feet and said, thank you, it's not just his physical healing that happened, it's a spiritual healing that happened. His sins were forgiven. So at this time, Jesus is on his way to the cross. He hasn't died on the cross yet in our timeline, but Jesus is already forgiving people's sins. And he was a Samaritan. So I used to think that this passage was just about thankfulness and making sure you say thank you to God for the things that he's done for you, and say thank you to people for the things that they've done for you. And that is true and that is important. But there's something deeper here, that this passage is about salvation. This is about forgiveness of sins. Even before Jesus died on the cross, he was forgiving people's sins. Your faith has made you well. Whole. Not just your physical ailments, but your spiritual life has been healed as well. So Jesus is saying it doesn't matter if you are a leper or not a leper, if you're clean or unclean, if you're a Jew or you're a Samaritan. Paul says later, there is neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek, slave or free. We are all made one in Jesus Christ. That's not a new thing that Paul came up with. That comes right here from Jesus, that Jesus forgiveness is available to everyone, whether you think you deserve it or not. I have a feeling that this man felt that he did not deserve Jesus's healing and forgiveness, yet he got it anyway. How many of us have had a feeling, whether it's, depression, or I've done something and it's really the devil just trying to get to you, and you say, I really don't deserve forgiveness for that. I really don't deserve anything good from God. And you kind of start to beat yourself up about things. It's very natural. It's very human. Happens to the best of us. But hear this truth. There is nothing that you could do that Jesus can't forgive. And Jesus' forgiveness goes across all of those borders, all of those boundaries. Doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Samaritan, if you're a leper or if you're clean, if you're a Christian, if you're not Christian, if you're male or female, gay or straight, COVID or no COVID. Doesn't matter what the circumstances is. Jesus' love, his mercy, and his forgiveness extends across all of those boundaries. And because of that, the man was grateful. Isn't that wonderful? I hope that inspired and encouraged you today. Just a reminder about our big VBS celebration tomorrow. You don't want to miss it. And I just pray for you that you have a blessed and wonderful weekend. Hope to see you soon.